there we go, who is helping us walk through the webinar as well. And with that, let's go ahead and advance the slide. Fabulous. And I'd like to introduce my colleague Althea Gonzalez, who is a consultant with GSER and will be speaking today on this webinar. Althea, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Camelia. We're excited to be sharing this information with both of you who are currently on the line. And in fact, Caleb, if you wouldn't mind unmuting them so that we can have them introduce themselves one more time. And I'll just say that I'm a consultant working with GSER and supporting the collaboratives that we'll hear about in a few minutes in the presentation. And Jessica, could you introduce yourself again, please?
Hi, I'm Jessica Murray, and I'm with the Texas Access to Justice Foundation.
Great. And Jasser?
Yeah, so my name is Jasser Wad, and I am the staff attorney here at the DACA project for the St. Mary's University School of Law Immigration Clinic.
Mm-hmm. And I missed, what city are you in, Jasser?
Oh, sorry, San Antonio, Texas.
Okay, great, awesome. Well, welcome. We're excited to have you both on. And we will be muting you now and go through the presentation, but definitely if you have questions, you can always put them in the chat window. And when we get towards the end of the presentation, we're going to have a section of frequently asked questions and open the lines at that point so that you can ask any other questions that may have popped up as well.
Thank you.
So Caleb, thank you. If you'll move us to the next slide. So the first thing that we wanted to share is that you may or may not know that you are part of a Delivering on the Dream collaborative. And this is a national effort that GSER has in partnership with foundation collaboratives across the country, really working on DACA and hopefully DAPA in the future to increase the number of immigrants who have status here in the U.S. And the focus of the national cohort of collaboratives is a few-fold, as you'll see in the bullets here. The first is increasing the number of immigrants applying for DACA and hopefully receiving that status. Working to build the legal infrastructure, the outreach, and the capacity in the field for immigration-related services. We know that across the country, we do not have enough players in any of those areas in outreach or legal areas or even in education to help people through the process and let them know the advantages of gaining status through DACA. And so in addition to building that infrastructure, organizational infrastructure on the ground, we also want to expand the community education and advocacy around DACA, making sure immigrants know of the possibilities, but also hopefully affecting some change in hearts and minds about how important immigrant integration is to the U.S.'s economy, our future as a nation, et cetera. So working on advocacy around DACA as well. So on the next slide, you'll see all of the locations in which we have DACA collaboratives. There are 10 collaboratives operating in 8 states. Those that are fully shaded are statewide collaboratives, so Illinois or North Carolina, Arkansas, Oregon. Then in some of them, particularly in Texas for the two of you, we have a collaborative that is operating in the greater Houston area, as well as another collaborative that is operating statewide. And so we have just a variety of ways that these collaboratives are configured, but it's really important to know and good to know that you are not alone in this work. This work is happening across the country in hopefully a coordinated way so that we can really have the greatest impact moving forward, not only with DACA, but all other immigration-related services. So let us jump in the next slide to talking about the reporting. As you all know, you're part of a collaborative locally that reports to a local coordinator in Texas. And that coordinator also reports to GSER for the overall body of work that we have of all the collaboratives. And so we're going to be looking at the impact of this DACA funding at the local level, as in Texas, as well as nationally across all of our collaboratives, and measuring a few very important things: the number of clients that were served, the capacity that was built over time, as we just talked about, legal, outreach, education, advocacy capacity, any partnerships that were created, both among nonprofit providers, but also perhaps with some typically unlikely partners, faith, business, chambers of commerce, government, et cetera. And then what advocacy efforts happened and the effect of those advocacy efforts. So part of the reporting is going to capture these different buckets of information. We want to make sure that as you all, and I see Miguel has joined us, Quintanilla, and we will welcome you fully now, Miguel, but a little later in the conversation we'll also take you off mute so you can introduce yourself and chime in with any questions you may have. You can use the chat window to add questions as well. So we're talking about the overview of why we're doing this reporting and how the reporting is going to happen. So we'll be asking you to report on all your DACA work, regardless of the funding source. We know that through, perhaps through the Texas Foundation, you have a certain amount of money that is covering this DACA work, but it may not represent all of the funding that you've received for DACA. So we want to look at all of your work, regardless of where those funding sources came from, get a sense of what's been happening in your organization and in your region. The local grantees, such as all of you, will be completing the grantee form online that you're going to see in a minute. For purposes of today, we'll also show you an Excel spreadsheet just so we can chat through it. But you'll be doing that form online, and then those online forms will then be reviewed by your local collaborative coordinator as part of your grant report. So they'll be checking in on that and then submitting information to us as well. But really the most important thing for you to know is that you'll be reporting to your local collaborative coordinator. All right, great. Next slide, Caleb, please. So we'll talk here about the timing of the report. The report will be for all the DACA work in the current grant period, but what we are defining as the current grant period may be different than what your grant period is. The funds, part of the funds that you have received at the local level came from national matching dollars from national foundations. And so in order to report to them, we're using their grant period timeline. So that grant period timeline is from October of 2014 to September of 2015. And that's the timeline that you'll be reporting on, not necessarily your individual grant timeline. So let's say that you started your grant in January of this year and it goes through the end of December. So you'll be reporting your results from January through September. And then as needed, you'll do a supplemental report when your grant ends in December. You'll complete this form one more time to give us the complete body of work that you accomplished in 2015. Your grantee interim reports, for some of you it will be an interim, for some it may be your final report, is due September 7th of this year, 2015. So let's get into the details of that reporting form. And for some of you, this reporting form will be already capturing much of the information that you have shared with your local collaborative or will already be reporting to them. Some of the questions may be different. And so we're going to look at the Excel document that was sent with the meeting invitation. It was something that you could download, and it's called the DOTD reporting form, grantee template. And DOTD, again, stands for the Delivering on the Dream Collaborative. So if you can all open that Excel spreadsheet, Caleb will also be sharing it here on the screen. And the invisible person behind the curtain is Caleb from CHISER, and we're grateful to his technical help to help us work this webinar today. And so it's about to pop up here. Great. So it is a little small on the screen. If you need to refer to the Excel document that you downloaded when you got into the meeting, you can also go through it there. So we'll start first on the first tab, which is the cover and instruction. And you'll see some instructions for you about proceeding with this form. That this actually is, and we're going to update it slightly, this will be a way for us to have a streamlined and coordinated response to DACA. And hopefully in the future, as soon as DAPA is implemented, we'll be using this form as well. But for the moment, obviously, we're just reporting on DACA. And as you'll see, we do want to report on all of the DACA work that you have done, regardless of the funding that you received to do it. And for this reporting form, you'll be including data in parts 2 and 3 for all your DACA-related activities, and we're going to walk through that. So we have here this cover and the instructions, and just a quick overview of what we'll be doing. We'll move to part 1 of the basic information next, and then we'll talk about your deliverables and the short answer responses. So Caleb, if you'll move to the basic info piece. So this is the second tab on your Excel document, and some pretty standard type information. We want to know where you're located, the name of your organization, your email address, and who is completing this form and their title, phone number, and then the period covered by this report. So again, even though the grant period we have here is from October 2014 to September 2015, if you didn't start your grant till sometime later, then you would be reporting a subset of that time frame. So if you started in January of this year, this is where you would put that you're reporting from January 2014 to September of 2015. And then the grant amount that you received from your local collaborative for this grant is what would go in there. Don't put in all of the dollars that you've received for DACA from all the different sources, just the amount of money from this particular source. And then lastly, in line 10 here is the location that is served by your grant, whether it's a city or a region or a state, a series of counties, however that is, put that information there. Great. And then let's move to part 2, the actual deliverables. And here I want you to make note of one piece, is that we tried to make clear which are the required answers and which answers are optional. The required answers all start in red, and we'll see this as well on the online form, that they're all highlighted in red section. And if you scroll down in your Excel document, you'll see that the optional are all in blue. So starting with the required section in the Excel spreadsheet, line 4, in this section we're going to be doing the education, outreach, and legal services provisions. And as you'll see, the very first one in line 4 is the number of participants at all outreach events. In the notes section in column E, there is more explanation about what we mean by outreach events. Across the country, we learned that folks call things different things. They may call it a workshop, an outreach event. They may do providing information and education about DACA at small home gatherings, at healthcare fairs, and so forth. So outreach is our label to capture all of those different places and vehicles where you have been sharing information and education about DACA. So that's line 4. That is different in a sense from line 5, where you are doing eligibility screening and intakes. So in line 5, we're much more focused on the person is being screened to see if they're eligible for DACA. You're doing an intake form, with them. And here we recognize that those screenings and intakes can happen again at lots of different places. So you might have a workshop where you give DACA information, and then the second half of the workshop is, okay, let's screen you for whether you're eligible or not. So it can happen in lots of different settings, but just the distinction is that in the first one, the outreach event, it's really that information out. And the second one is that it's more so legal staff, BIA accredited reps, or volunteers who have that possibility of making those distinctions are doing those eligibility screenings and intakes. Then in line 6, we're going to ask about the number of initial applications completed, and 7 is the number of renewal applications completed. We recognize that you're both in the process of helping with renewals, and there are still people aging into the process, or folks who are now just coming forward to apply, and we want to make sure we capture all of those. And in line 8, if you can here, talk about the number of individuals who have been screened as potentially eligible for some permanent kind of relief. So you might have someone in line 5 who you did an eligibility screening, and then in line 8, they also, as you screen them, you found that they were available or eligible for a more permanent relief. And so you would count them in both places. All right. So that's the Education, Outreach, and Legal Services section. And again, if you have questions, put them in the chat window. We'll move down to Section B, line 10, the field capacity. And I think these are fairly self-explanatory. We want to get a sense of how we're building capacity, how you all are building capacity in your area. So how many legal volunteers did you engage? How many newly accredited BIA reps do you have? How many non-legal volunteers have been trained? And so feel free to add those numbers. We want to see how are you engaging more community support for this work. And lastly, here in the required section in line 15 is the characteristics of the population served. And in this piece, we're really only asking about age. Now, you'll obviously see that we have ages beyond DACA eligibility in this part. That's in, in preparation for when we're doing DAPA. But we want to get a breakdown of how many of your DACA folks are under 18, 18 to 24, and 25 to 34 that you're serving in any of those areas. So whether they were folks who came to education workshops or were screened for eligibility, et cetera, we'd like to get a sense of that population that was served. All right, and seeing no questions, we will proceed then to the optional fields category, line 25. And here, we recognize that some of these may be easier to capture than others, and so that's why we made them optional. In line 27, the number of cases handled through case management, wanted to define for you all how we're thinking about case management. And case management can look like lots of different things. I know in social work, case management means something else. For our purposes, case management is the process of following candidates to the end of the application process and can include helping them obtain proof of residency, providing referrals, any of those pieces. We know that some organizations, some of our community-based centers will start the process with a client who walks in and is interested in DACA and doesn't have the legal services in-house to take them all the way through the process, but will be following them. So they may come in, refer them to a local legal service provider, but then they're still following them and maybe helping them get the proof of residency or translate or notarize documents, things along those lines. So we wanted to make sure we acknowledge that level of effort as well by having this case management field. Lines 29 and 30, again, these are more self-explanatory about new attorneys. And if you are an organization in line 30 who has been providing technical assistance to other organizations, perhaps you're legal justice center, and you're helping build the capacity of community centers in BIA reps, or providing consultations for them when they have challenging cases, then please feel free here to list the number of community-based organizations that have been receiving technical assistance from your organization. And then these others will be pretty self-evident. We have the rest of the characteristics of population served, gender, country of origin in line 38, the location of where these clients are coming from. Are they rural residents? Are they urban, suburban? How long have they been in the U.S., their educational attainment, and their language proficiency. We recognize that you may or may not be capturing this kind of information, and so if you are capturing it and you have the ability to report on it, that would be fabulous. And if you don't, we're going to try and capture your sense of it in the short answers tab in just 1 second. So I'll just take a pause here and see if there are any questions in the chat box. None so far. So Caleb, then take us over to the short answer tab, if you would, please. And so the short answer section is our chance to understand that sometimes the story is not told through the numbers. The story is told through words and a more qualitative reporting. So here's where we have that opportunity to tell the story. And again, telling the story not just about the numbers of people served, but the capacity that has been built, all the other pieces. So in the first question about 2 or 3 key lessons learned or promising practices that have emerged, here's an opportunity for you to talk about a wide variety of things, but it can also include the role of technology in your work, how you have been innovative in any of it, communications and how that has been operating in your area. If you have engaged folks with loans to pay for their DACA applications, or there have been scholarships that were provided. Also, if you have seen effective outreach strategies in your work, and certainly any challenges or gaps that you've identified. One of the beauties of this question is that this information not necessarily ascribed to you all as an individual organization, but it's being shared across the country so that we're all learning from one another and not reinventing the wheel as much as possible. So we certainly at the national level have been looking at what's working in Texas and what can be applied to New York, and et cetera. So we appreciate your sharing with us what you're learning on the ground so that we can learn with you. In the second question, the overview of the demographics, this is our opportunity to get to telling the story about the people served, especially if we don't have the numbers for that optional section on the actual deliverables. So this will be an opportunity for you to say, you know, majority of the people that we served were Mexican. You know, it looked like 2/3 of the people that we served were from this particular region, or a majority of them were folks aging in and 15 and under, or they all came from rural counties, et cetera. So it gives us an opportunity to get a sense of those who you are serving. Question 3, we would love to know what kinds of permanent relief you found for folks, if you did indeed find folks who were eligible for those. And if you had a certain percentage of, let's say, 10% of the folks that we saw were actually eligible for some kind of permanent relief. And then question 4 is about the organizational level. So we move a little bit from talking about the individual served to talking about your organization and your community. What capacity, what changes happen in capacity? You may have added 2 new BIA reps and doubled the number of folks that you could see. You might have had something shrink. I know in some communities, when their one immigration attorney has moved out of town, the community has been at a loss for how to address some of these services. So that may be also your case, that there's the capacity in your community or for your organization has changed that way. And if you have added any new functions or services as a result of this initiative, here's an opportunity to share about that. And if there are any stories of clients that are particularly striking to you, this would be a great place to add that as well. And then in question 5, we're going to ask about how you engage those who are affected by this issue in your work, either as volunteers or as paid staff. I know some organizations have taken DACA recipients and offered them internships in their organization or made them part of the outreach squad to tell more people about DACA. So give us some information about how you've been engaging those affected in question 5. And then in question 6, what about those non-traditional partners? Who have you been able to engage? I know for some folks, they've actually been able to hold DACA workshops in schools or in libraries, or maybe to get their government officials to all of a sudden come out in support of DACA or in support of in-state tuition, those sorts of things. So question 6 will be the opportunity to share that. And then lastly, how have your efforts strengthened the infrastructure either locally or across your state in policy questions around DACA and immigrant issues? And lastly, line 8 is just an opportunity for any other things that we should have asked you that we didn't ask you that you think are important to share. All right. So that's the overview of what the questions are. Again, to repeat, we will not be having you fill out this Excel document, but we're going to make it much easier for you by having an online reporting system. And if Caleb can switch over to have us look at the online system, then we'll walk through that just so you can see what it's going to look like. You can get a feel for it. And by the way, while we are switching over, each collaborative will have their own reporting form, so you won't have to wonder, as Texas, am I reporting to my Texas coordinator? They'll all be specifically targeted to your location and your collaborative. So as you'll see here in the grantee reporting form, it starts with that same kind of overview and the instructions. It's exactly the same. You'll scroll down and see the basic information, part 1 that we talked about, where you're going to fill in the information about your organization, is exactly the same. And then you'll hit the next button to get to part 2, the actual deliverables. And as I mentioned earlier, the required questions are in red. The headers are in red. So Section A, the education, outreach, and legal services, all of those questions are required. And in Section B, the field capacity, if you'll scroll down, Caleb, thank you, that's also required, as is that question about age and the characteristics of population served. So that whole section is the required section, not too onerous. And then the optional fields are in blue below with the headers in blue. And this totally replicates exactly the questions that were in the Excel spreadsheet. And so you'll get to the bottom of that page having filled in all that you can, all that you have information for. And then you will hit the next button again. And this is the short answers. And the short answers are all required. We're going to switch that over to red just so that you'll know, but the short answers are all required. But they are exactly the same questions as what you saw in the Excel spreadsheet. And again, just a reminder that you'll be submitting your actual numbers and story for everything up to September. And then if your grant, your individual grant goes beyond September, when you're done with your grant, you'll be submitting a supplemental at grant's end. And the great thing about this, if you scroll down to the bottom of the short answer page, you'll hit submit there, and that will immediately go to your collaborative coordinator, and you'll get a PDF of your of your submission as well. So you'll have that information as well. All right. I think we'll stop here and return to the PowerPoint, Caleb, so that we can then open up the phone lines. I'll go through some frequently asked questions.
The conference has been unmuted.
Thank you. I'm saying thank you to the recording person. That's great. So let's talk about some frequently asked questions that we've had, and also give you all an opportunity to ask further questions. So one of the first questions we get is, what if we haven't collected this data yet? Maybe your grant did start in January and you've been chugging along doing great work, but you haven't been capturing all of this. We understand that we will be starting in the beginning of some people's grants, in the middle of other people's grants. So if you would collect information from now on, and then do your best in the short answer section to summarize anything that you have not yet collected. We don't want you to go back and try and recount folks unless you have that data in a database that is easy to gather this information. But barring that, then just go ahead and start counting from now forward and provide information on that, the numerical information, and then give us the rest of what you can as your best guesses in the short answer section. The second thing that we want to make sure to highlight is that this is representative of all your DACA work, not just the DACA work that is supported through this particular grant. We want to get a really good understanding of what your organization is doing and what's happening in your local community. The third bullet to just reemphasize is that the required section is going to be highlighted in red, and that they they very specifically are the basics that we need to know. The optional sections, we would love to have that information. It helps us understand more deeply, is there a large Asian Pacific Islander population that you're serving or not. But if you don't have the information on the optional section, then give us your best guesses in the short answer. And then that's the answer in a sense to bullet number 4 is why is there some similarity between the quantitative and qualitative sections, is that we wanted to make sure to address the fact that you may not have been able to collect this data ahead of time, or it may be difficult in a sense to collect educational level of the folks coming in. And so we wanted to give you an opportunity in the qualitative questions to be able to share that information, even if you couldn't capture numerically the statistics for all the populations served. So I'll take a breath now and see if you have questions about the reporting forms themselves, and also any other information that you think would be helpful for us to share with you or to add into those reporting forms to make it easier for you to respond to those questions. And if you would chime in with your questions, and also while you're thinking of a question, Miguel, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, since I forgot to give you that opportunity earlier. Miguel, are you there?
Yes, sorry about that. I was on mute.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Miguel Quintanilla. I'm the workshop coordinator with Turk.
Oh, in Tennessee.
That's right. Yep.
Great. Okay. Thank you for joining us, Miguel.
Thank you.
So do any of you have questions about this reporting form, either what to report on, or when to report, or how to report?
Hopefully I have a question. This is
Go ahead, Jessica.
Should I enter information for each of our grantees? Let's see. We have 5 of them. Should I enter individual information for each of those, or should I enter our aggregate information and summarize the short answers?
Camelia, do you want to?
Yeah. So I think, Jessica, so for you, it's like a slightly different situation because Texas Access to Justice Foundation is the coordinator for your site. So in fact, you'll be using the coordinator form, which is different from this grantee form that we just went through. So you'll take basically this form we just reviewed. That's what you'll be giving to each of your grantees. They'll be completing it, and then they'll be submitting the information to, I think, Jonathan actually, or maybe you. And then you would take all of that information and compile it into the coordinator form. And that's what would be the summary exactly that you'd then be sending to GSER.
And we actually have a webinar that we did for coordinators about the coordinator form, and we could share that with you.
Oh, that would be great.
That would be helpful.
I missed that. Should I have our grantees complete this through the system, or should I create a form in our web grant system? I'm not really. I just want to make sure that I'm not lost as far as what I need to have them do. I know Jonathan, he asked me to create a form in our web grant system, but if we have this, then we don't need to do that.
And I had a conversation with Jonathan a couple of weeks ago, and in fact he and I just played telephone tag, and he just tried calling me now during the middle of this webinar to make sure how it would be best for you all to do it. We're fine either way, whatever is convenient for you. If it's already part of an online system that you're using for your grantees and you want to embed these questions so that they don't have to do two separate reporting pieces, that's fine with us as long as the deadline that we have of September 7th is met for the grantees. Or if you want to have them fill in this separate form so that it's not confusing to your other system, that's fine too. So if you would like, when I circle back with Jonathan, perhaps we can all three have a conversation to decide what's going to work best for Texas.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay,
and
great.
As far as the due date goes, I know let's see, I was just about to send Camelia an email. We have, our grant year ends September 30th. So I was just, I'm not sure if you want data through September or through August.
Right. So what we're hoping to, and feel free to jump in, Althea, but what we're hoping to do with all of the sites is to get the information from the grantees sent to you, the coordinators, by September 7th, so you all have plenty of time to compile it. And if there needs to be any follow-up that you have to do with any of the grantees, you have time to do that.
Sure.
And then by October 7th is when you would send the total compiled information to GSER. And then I know when we were just emailing back and forth, what I was saying is if you want to actually give your grantees the deadline of September 30th and you feel like you have enough time to just do that compilation between like September 30th and October 7th, then that's fine too. I think the main thing is we're just, as GSER, we're really hoping to get that initial set of data, the results, by October 7th.
So the actual date for, let's see, on the spreadsheet it says September 7th, 2015.
For the grantees.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
So it wouldn't be data through September.
Right.
It would be through August.
Exactly. Yep. And when you see the coordinator form, you'll see something different. So as the coordinator, the deadline by when you'd want to submit that information to GSER would be October 7th. So it would be after September 30th, just after.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and so that you bring up really great questions, Jessica, about how to manage it from your standpoint. It might be helpful to give your grantees even a shorter deadline, let's say August 15th that they're going to report on, and then that gives them a couple weeks to get their report in before September 7th, and it gives you plenty of time to turn it around to GSER by October 7th.
Okay.
But it also then means that they will need to submit a second report for those last 45 days of work from August 15th to September 30th. So that's one option. The other option is, as Camille was just saying, they can report on all their work through September 30th. It just gives you a very narrow window of time to compile information, but it does avoid them having to do a supplemental for 45 days of work.
Okay. I see.
Does that help with some options of how you might
It is helpful.
play
Thank
it out?
you.
Mm-hmm. And I think,
Jessica, I can go ahead, Althea.
I was just going to say, from GSER standpoint, it really doesn't matter. We just have this response dates that we need. But whichever way is going to be easier for you is certainly how we'd like it to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Exactly. And I was going to say, I can also send you a link to the webinar we did for the coordinators, Jessica, and then I can be part of that follow-up conversation as well.
Okay. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for those questions, Jessica. Chapter Miguel, do you have questions about the form or the process for reporting?
No. I work with somebody else here at the clinic to compile the numbers for the form and I guess the information. And so this call has been very informative, and I've learned a lot about exactly what we're trying to capture. And so I'm going to try and work and get all this information to Nicole as soon as I can.
Great. Great.
Great. And Jasper, actually, I was going to ask Jasper, so, and Turk is the coordinator in Tennessee, I believe, right? Like he will be compiling all the information from the various grantees. Is that correct?
Yes, it's Lindsay. It's Lindsay that's actually going to be doing that. She's the executive director of Turk.
Oh, sorry, Miguel. Yes.
I'm getting better orientated with this, just because I think in the future I might get more involved with this.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm. And if you, in the process of going through this form, if you have questions, you can certainly talk to your local coordinator about it, or as you know, Turk is the local coordinator. If you talk to your foundation collaborative lead person, Kaki, feel free to send her questions as well, and we certainly are here to help. Okay, any other last questions about this process? So Camille, would you like to just walk through the next steps for us?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So basically in terms of next steps, for any of the grantees who are on the line right now, you're going to be receiving a link from your coordinator to the online grantee reporting form. So basically what we were just looking at during the webinar, not the Excel spreadsheet, but the online form, you'll be getting a link to that to do your reporting at the end of the grant period. So that's number one. Number two is we will send you a recording of this webinar so you have it just as reference information, so expect to see a link. And then feel free to reference the Excel handout in the future, but just remember that you're going to be submitting your outcomes in that online form. And then feel free to contact your coordinator with any questions. So we have a few coordinators on the line, but there's that difference of there's the coordinator who will be compiling all the information, and then there are all of the fabulous grantees who will be doing the work on the ground and then reporting back their numbers to the coordinator themselves. So that's it. So basically expect an email, follow-up email from us, and then you'll be getting a link to the online form very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you everybody, and thank you Althea and Caleb.
Appreciate you all. Have a great holiday weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
And Felicia and Caleb, are we still on?
I'm still on.
Okay, great.
Are you still on, Caleb?
Yes, I am.
Hello.